right, hello and welcome to another expert interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine and Pipeliner CRM, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Matt Heinz of Heinz Marketing. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I thought today that we're focusing in this month on marketing and sales alignment, or sales and marketing alignment, whichever direction you're coming from. And so I thought I'd talk to Matt on this subject and maybe start with a very basic kind of fundamental question. Okay, so it's 2017. Why are we still talking about sales and marketing alignment?
In part because it hasn't happened. In some companies it has. In some companies, the culture exists such that it is a natural course of operations. I think in many companies, you still have sales and marketing on entirely different planes with different objectives. And I think as a marketer, I believe this is mostly marketing's fault. We as marketers have not embraced a level of revenue responsibility that sales has always had. Right. And as long as marketers really, ultimately feel most comfortable measuring likes and clicks and retweets and even leads. I mean, you can't buy a beer with a marketing qualified lead. So, there's a level of alignment that has to occur. There's a level of cultural change that has to happen to sustain that. And I don't think a lot of companies have gotten there. And honestly, I don't think a lot of marketing leaders have been willing to step up to the plate on that as well.
Okay, so where you have seen this actually happen and work well, or have helped organizations get there, what are some of the starting points?
One thing I think you have to, as a marketing organization, have better empathy and transparency for what the organization requires. You have to be comfortable managing objectives that you don't have complete control over. The sales team has never had control over hitting their number entirely, so marketing, that shouldn't really necessarily have control of that either. I think you have to be comfortable with change. You have to be comfortable attempting to achieve something that you haven't done before and you really don't know how to achieve. If you've been comfortable generating a certain set of leads and now all of a sudden you require those leads to qualify at a certain rate into deals, that's different. But I think to have a level of transparency and flexibility and empathy across the organization, that is going to be hard if you haven't done it before, but we're going to work on that journey. And we really don't have a choice if we expect to hit our number and we expect marketing to be a contributor to the metrics that really matter in the organization.
Right. So do you think then that a lot of marketing people don't really understand the reality of what it's like to be a salesperson, or have taken, because you mentioned empathy there, maybe have taken enough time to kind of even mentally put themselves in the shoes of salespeople?
So I think there's two different things there. I think one is, a marketer that understands that their objectives is sales. The objective is a revenue number. That's a first big step that a lot of marketers haven't yet made. Understanding the job of the sales rep is another story, right? And I don't know very many marketers that have had a sales job and had to carry a bag, had to carry a number. I didn't have a sales job until I started this business. And, now, we still 9 years later, I don't have a full-time salesperson. I'm the main sales guy. And so I am selling. And it is a grind, let me tell you. It is, to get, you see like, these clients and this great business, man, it is a lot of work,
sure.
Behind the scenes. And I think if you haven't done that, you don't realize how hard that is. Equally, salespeople haven't necessarily sat in marketing shoes. They don't realize how hard marketing is today. Good golly, trying to get someone's attention when 18,000 other companies are trying to get their attention and trying to get them to engage with your sales team. And then sales complains, well, there's not a good enough phone number. And, I don't care if someone just wants the white paper. It's like, dude, it is, both jobs are really friggin' hard and getting harder. So I think, we talk a couple times about empathy, understanding what the other side is going through, understanding that it's never going to be perfect, but we don't have a choice but work together and figure out how to make this work. I've seen more and more evidence this year that integration of sales and marketing efforts and objectives is making a difference. When you speak from the same message, when you are able to orchestrate your communication between sales and marketing more effectively, it stands out in a sea of sameness in the market. And you're more likely to get the attention of your prospect. You're more likely to get the phone call you want. And I think that doing that in silos where marketing is doing one thing and sales is doing another, that just doesn't cut it.
So in the organizations where you've seen this work well, do they come together to plan out the strategy and, what pieces are going to play and how communications flow? How have you seen this work?
Yeah, I mean, typically, they both start with a number they have to hit. We have a number at the end of the year, a number end of the quarter, and you can start with just one spreadsheet. How many deals do we need to close? How much pipeline do we need to get there, and how many leads need to go into that? Where those deals come from may differ depending on the type of business you're going after. If you're going after SMB to maybe even mid-market business, maybe sales isn't involved until a lead is generated. Right. So marketing is very much focused on what we call marketing sourced pipeline or marketing sourced deals. The bigger the deal, the bigger the average deal size you're going after, the more likely it is that you're going to have sales actually sourcing the conversation, sales sourcing the lead. That doesn't mean marketing can't still have influence over that deal. And so we start to separate now marketing source versus marketing influence deals. And I think along that pipeline, you start with understanding what everyone's job is at each stage and what message you need to put in front of prospects at each stage of their buying journey. That becomes critical to having that single presence in the market that actually gets you noticed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating point because I do think that as you say, you can tell organizations where there are dual messages, where you get one, marketing message, and then when you talk to somebody out of sales, you get a completely different message or a different spin on that message. So, which is okay in some regard, but when they digress radically, it's not so good.
Right. Yeah, I think, thanks for downloading the white paper. Would you like to see a demo? That message doesn't work. No one ever says yes to that question. And I don't blame, the sales organization wants to get the demo. That's what they're being asked to do. They want to move the conversation forward. But sometimes 3 steps is faster than 1. Sometimes if you qualify a prospect based on their needs, if you can challenge a status quo that they have, they will eventually, and sometimes sooner than later, show some organic interest in whatever you're talking about, right? If you can prove that you understand their problem, again, we're kind of back to empathy, right? I mean, if you're empathetic about the customer's needs and problems and indicate that you've worked with other companies like them to solve it, how you solve it, what you can sell them to solve it becomes a secondary part of the conversation, or at least becomes a subsequent conversation after you've proven your credibility and worth to that prospect as someone they should talk to. And that credibility building, that empathy building, I've seen great examples of that coming from sales. I've seen great examples of that coming from marketing. And ideally, it's an orchestrated effort with a single consistent message. So it's not about he said or she said. It's not about my credit or your credit. Right. Let's go get the deal.
So when you work with organizations, when you go in, do you insist on having both groups at the table? I mean, is that typically, or is that an ideal scenario? And sometimes you just need to influence one from the other?
Yeah, I mean, as a consultant, it's fun. I'm smiling because as a consultant, there's very little insisting that goes on, and I think this is why culture is so important to making this shift. I mean, if you are dragging a head of marketing, kicking and streaming to the table to do this, and in some cases you may be dragging the salesperson kicking and streaming. I've seen that, Gisco, as well. I've seen CMOs committed to this change, and a sales organization saying, "We've heard this before. Yeah. It's never worked before. Just give us our collateral, and we'll be on our way." And so there has to be, and having sort of a senior, like a CEO or someone come down and say you have to do this doesn't work either if the players aren't committed to it. So there either has to be a change in approach and culture within the organization, or in some cases you may need to make changes to the people on the bus so that you're willing to sustain that. I mean, this is not something that happens at sales kickoff, then everyone goes back to their corners. Right. I mean, this is not something that you just put together a spreadsheet and then you never talk again. This isn't about sitting in meetings all the time either. There has to be, like, for instance, if I go to your digital marketing team, if Mr. CMO, I go to your digital marketing team, and if their number one metric is still lowest possible cost per lead, that tells me there's probably not alignment. I don't care how much the lead costs. I care how much the opportunity costs. I care about getting the deal. I may be willing to spend 4 times as much on a lead if it's the right prospect that actually converts at a better rate. So that's the conversation I want to start having. And those are the daily conversations, the daily decisions that tell me that the culture is starting to change, that tells me that the alignment is actually starting to stick.
Yeah. So, talk to me a little bit about inbound, right? Because to some degree, inbound became such a big thing over the last couple of years, and that some salespeople have kind of gotten into the habit of sitting back and waiting now for leads to come in, and marketing are supposed to generate, and there's magical inflow of inbound leads. Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective, because it doesn't happen like that. It's not magic, right? There's a lot of work that goes into it, and to some degree, it may have spoiled salespeople a little bit because they expect this constant inflow.
I feel like we keep waiting for the magic, and I feel like we keep glomming onto things in marketing and in sales that we think are going to make everything easy. I mean, there is no silver bullet.
Right.
We thought it was social selling. That alone didn't solve our problems. We thought it was inbound. That alone didn't solve our problems. And we thought it was ABM, and that alone didn't solve our problems. So it's never going to be one of these things. It doesn't mean those things don't have value. Inbound has enormous value if you can get your prospects to come to you. I mean, it can incredibly subsidize your acquisition costs, but you're probably not going to hit your number if you just sit and wait for the phone to ring. You don't have control over quantity or quality if you're simply waiting for inbound. I don't think that means, and so the opposite, people say, well, cold calling's dead. You can't just call someone. I said, well, sure you can, right? I can pick up the phone right now and try to call someone. I may have a low conversion rate, but when I look at my email campaigns, I'm not expecting 60% conversion rate. I'm looking at, something sub 1% that I consider good in many cases. So, I think the message you bring and the approach you take and the value you bring in each one of those interactions, is really what's most important. So it's not a knock on inbound. I think a friend of mine, Dan McDade from Point Clear, he's the first person I heard use the term all bound, right? I mean, you can't just do one or the other.
All bound, I like that.
You have to do outbound to the people you care the most about. And if you're smart and successful, you can subsidize that with some inbound so that you don't have to do expensive outbound for everything. But you have to take control of your number. And you have to be proactive at bringing on the right prospects that are best suited to be successful with your product or service.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I love that all bound. Is that what you said?
Yeah, all bound
from Dan. Yeah, and we've talked to Dan in the past. So what I think is part of the issue, and I totally agree with that you need to take all of these things. Is that I agree we've become a little bit of a shiny object, because where we're chasing the and especially if somebody comes out with a new term, we love that, so we go running after that, and and in some ways technology has spoiled us now, because technology keeps promising all of these things, but there's still the fundamental underlying things that have to be done, and not everything applies to every situation, right? So I guess at the end of the day, you'd probably say it all comes back to really understanding your customer and your target market, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the better you understand who you're selling to, the better you can have that challenging the status quo conversation at the beginning of the buying journey, which is a lot about you. It's not about your product or service. It's all about them. Before you can get your prospect to care about you, you have to prove that you care about them.
Right.
And this is one of those some 3 steps is faster than one scenarios where you're not going to get their sustained attention if all you do is beat your own chest and talk about how great you are. Some prospects may do the value translation themselves and understand why they need you. Many others simply don't have time to think about it. They may be smart enough to figure it out, but they're not going to take the time because you're just one of 18 other people this hour that are trying to get their attention. You have to be smarter about that. But I think you also have to understand well enough the customer so you know how and where to approach them. Right. We're seeing some research now that indicates that those that are using both digital and non-digital channels and are integrating them fully amongst each other are seeing the greatest level of effectiveness of their marketing efforts overall. Greater than those that are just doing digital, greater than those by far that are doing those campaigns but doing them in silos. So channel diversity and channel integration are 2 keys to making your marketing more successful. Now that is hard. That is extreme. Doing that at scale, the bigger you get, is really, really hard. But it's clear in the data that we're seeing now that is what works.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's why We ourselves we do the digital, we do the analog, the in-person stuff as well. We do it all because we totally agree with you that it's the combination at the end of the day that's going to win. Plus, plus I think there's and maybe you're seeing this too. I think the pendulum is coming back a little bit, getting a little bit more balanced. Where people are now looking, even from a marketing point of view, they're looking for something maybe a little bit more personal, more getting back even to in person, or communicating with people as opposed to everything being digital.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think, digital sometimes it feels cheaper, it feels faster, it feels more nimble. But that doesn't mean it's the right channel.
Right.
Depending on who your prospect is and where they are, it may be most efficient, not based on just getting attention or leads, but by getting the opportunities and the deals. It might be most efficient for you to do more events, to do more direct mail, and to integrate the message and the approach across what your sales team is calling with and what you're doing at an event and what you're doing in direct mail and what you're doing online. I think that, if clearly there's a limit to what you can spend to acquire a customer, but acquisition cost is very different than lead costs. And we are confusing those sometimes at an operational level as marketers.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So if you were going to give some practical advice to somebody who's watching or listening to this, first of all, how would they gauge what level of sales and marketing alignment exists in their company today?
It's a great question. I think the first harbinger of that would be, what is marketing's scorecard look like? What are you measuring as a marketer? Can you buy a beer with the metrics on your scorecard? Does your CFO naturally understand the key metrics, or do you have to translate certain acronyms to her to help her figure out what you're actually trying to do? And I think those are indicators of whether or not you're aligned with the business objectives, or whether you're off on an island doing marketing things that other people don't necessarily understand. And this isn't just about optics.
Sure.
I mean, if the business is struggling, or if you're tightening the belt, your CFO is going to start tightening things they don't understand. She's going to start deciding that if I don't understand how this thing actually drives revenue, then I don't know why I should continue to fund it. Right. I mean, this isn't, survival is sort of your last ditch effort, right? As a marketer, you should be proving the impact of your marketing, not just marketing source, but marketing influence sales. You do that well, come budgeting time, it's not a matter of fighting for the same amount you got last year. It's a matter of how much more you can spend to generate the same and better impact. I mean, you need to be thinking about marketing as a profit center for the business moving forward, and operationalize that in your metrics, operationalizing that in your culture, and in the way daily decisions are made.
So that's a fantastic piece of advice. So you would advise marketing managers, directors, VPs, CMOs is to start thinking about how you can demonstrate real economic value from what you do, rather than, sit back and wait for that to be imposed upon you, if you like.
Yeah, and honestly, I love the way that you phrase that. If the CFO comes to you and forces you to do this, it immediately puts you in a defensive position. If you go to your CFO and say, I want to build a model that demonstrates the revenue impact of marketing, and even as a marketer, you say, listen, I don't yet understand how to do that.
Sure.
But I want to make sure that however I do that is aligned with your models. Even if you don't have the answers, the fact that you as a marketing leader, you as a CMO brought that to your CFO will look very impressive. And you will have a CFO that will enthusiastically work with you to solve that and to come up with that model that you will now then go and sort of build in alignment with that CFO. So, and I can't tell you that even if you don't have all the answers, even if you don't have all the attribution lines and can't see everything, the fact that a CFO sees that you as a marketer are making decisions along that framework, she will give you more of the benefit of the doubt. She will no longer ask you 1,000 questions simply to try to understand what the hell you're trying to spend money on. But so listen, I know that you're aligned around the right thing. I know you're trying to make decisions based on what has a revenue impact. Therefore, we're going to give you some rope so you can try some new things and have that impact.
Yeah, and you're likely to be maybe the first marketing person who's ever walked through that CFO's door and had that conversation. So you get even a bigger benefit.
You might be, yeah. And the fact that you bring that up first, that goes a long, long way. Yeah, even if you don't have the answers yet.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Matt. We're bumping up against the end of the time, so I wanted to give you a little bit of time at the end just to tell people a little bit more about yourself, what your company does, and how they can contact you.
Sure. Heinz Marketing, we are B2B marketing consultants helping, companies just build a repeatable, sustainable pipelines of business. You can learn about us at heinzmarketing.com. That's HEINZ marketing.com. Or we publish a lot of content there. We do a lot of content on Twitter at Heinz Marketing. Or if you got a question for me, I'm just Matt, MATT, at heinzmarketing.com.
Great. Well, listen, thanks again, Matt, for joining us today. It's a great conversation. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much.